Quitting on a game is something that every one of us has done at least once in their life, and if you yet haven't, first, congrats. Second, don't worry, your turn will eventually come. Some drop a game after some hours in it because it didn't grab their attention enough to push them into finishing it, some drop it not even after having finished the tutorial, while others drop it just because the phone log on the initial screen is not of their liking. Normally, players are more keen to drop a game early in its course or midway through it. It is highly unlikely that a player quits when it reaches the late game, as, by that point, it is normally a bit invested in the story, the world, the characters, and so on. However, depending on the game, these moments can be attributable to a certain quit moment even though they happen after a greatly different amount of time. For example, an early quit from Final Fantasy XII or from getting over it are going to need different periods of time in order to actually happen. If you say I dropped Final Fantasy XII in the early game, it means that you drop it in a range of time that goes from 1 millisecond to probably 10 hours. While if you say that for a rage game, it probably means that you dropped it after even less than 20 minutes. Still, the worst kind of quit moments are those that happen in a minigame, where the player got invested enough in the game to continue playing it, but is also constantly reminded of things that are so continuously annoying that just make it lose faith in an eventual improvement of the game and cause its insertion in the drop list. And you know what normally is the main culprit of this? Game design. As I said at the start, I think many of us have at least dropped a game in their life. What was the main culprit? An appalling difficulty balancing? Abstruse mechanics that were nowhere explained in the game? Uninteresting story and characters? Or repetitive and boring gameplay? Some of these are problems that arise because of game design, and I think this can be exemplified by the game I want to talk about today. Because yes, this whole paragraph was just the introduction to one of the many reviews I've done on this channel. Though, this time, there is a twist, otherwise I would have used the normal way I introduce videos. The game in question is the Emerald Tablet, an atelier-style game that was produced by NieR and published by Sekai Project on Steam in 2019, in which we control Misty, a money-loving student at the local alchemy school of Ostia. Nein, dieses nicht der Bundesstaat Österreich, warum sage ich das? Who needs to repay the debts she contracted with her best friend, Gladys, before she graduates, unless she wants to become her personal maid. Now, when I say an atelier-like game, I mean something that is similar to the saga developed by Gust. If you have no idea what I am talking about, first, very bad, that arises in my mind about your grade of refined culture, and, of course, just to unveil my irony, I am joking. But secondly, it is a series of games developed by Gust since 1997, where we normally control an alchemist that has to reach an objective of hers through the use of alchemy, the power of friendship, and of fury baiting and combat. Seriously talking, these are games that, in their modern iterations, conjugate turn-based combat with an alchemy system that is used to convert materials that the player has gathered in its outings in the various dungeons into useful items or story-related ones, a relationship system through which the main heroine is going to deepen her bond with the other characters of the story, and many other JRPG elements are not going to list for brevity's sake. By the way, seriously, if you like cozy games and you have never touched an atelier game, do yourself a favor and try playing one. They are honestly good, relaxing games. Returning to the topic at hand, it is highly evident that the Emerald Tablet inspires itself to the Atelier series, as the alchemy system is practically identical, there is even an infamous barrel in the store page right near the protagonist, and the game tries to have the same atmosphere as its games. Still, for now, let's start talking about the story. Now, what the Emerald Tablet tries to do is to simulate the daily life of Misty by having various events scattered throughout the 3 years the game gives you in order to complete the main objectives and obtain the good ending, and by having mainly 2 major narrative arcs during the entire game. Now, what are the objectives you need to complete in order to finish the game? Well, you only need to obtain 400,000 reputation points for Misty's workshop, create a Blackstone, probably because the philosophical stone was going to be a bit too much of a citation to real alchemy, or the thought that people were going to tell them that we were just copying the Atelier saga again, and repay Gladys' debt. The first 2 are the objectives you need to achieve in order to graduate from the alchemy school, while the last one is the one you need to do in order not to become Gladys' maid. Though, there is to say that Gladys is a bit obsessed with Misty, considering that she is her sugar mama, as during the story, many times Misty causes trouble and has to repay other people, and every time Gladys offers to cover her and increase her debt without an ounce of interest rate, and also because, apparently, she has a tendency of sneaking into her house at night, as it's said by her other personal maid, Winnie, so probably becoming her maid would not even be that bad of a destiny, all things considered. Still, these are the long-term objectives. The short ones, where short means less than the entire game, are the 2 main arcs that the game offers. The first one is the mystery of the Emerald Tablet, which, by the way, is actually a real hermetic text that is considered to be the foundation of European and Arabic alchemy, and the second one is the defense of the country of Ostia by the possible invasion of a neighbor nation. Now, these 2 plot lines are nothing terrific in terms of quality and can be enjoyed, but they end up feeling more like something that was put there because, otherwise, the player would have been stuck in the same gameplay loop without a real objective or motivation for way too much time. Plus, they're not even that well developed. For example, after we discover the text of the Emerald tablet, you would think that that information would have been used in some way in the game. Instead, the game just forgets about its existence and it is brought up just during the first lines of the final as a "oh, what an adventure it was" fact. In a few words, it was effectively useless. And this is the plotline that lasts the most in the game, one that gets completely forgotten after it ends. As for the second one, this goes approximately like this. Oh no, the Empire trademark is going to strike! Don't worry, we have a formidable weapon. All we need now is 20 of this, 20 of that, and 20 of this flower here, and oh, after you bring them, all you need to do is do a stage and the Empire trademark will disappear forever from your sight. And I'm not joking, this is practically what happens in it. After having said this, you can understand why the story feels a bit far-fetched. It really feels like they had made the game before thinking about the story and remembered about it in a late stage of development. Also, these events are normally divided in two parts. The one where you need to talk to a series of charters in the city, and then a quest that concludes that instance of it and lets you proceed with the next story section. Even events that happen during the 3 years and that should show Misty's daily life are not exactly something worth being watched. These events can be divided into two categories. The one that increases your depth, and all the others. The first one showcases the way in which Misty messes up this time of the week and serve only to increase your depth towards ladies, so to make you look at your goal and say, I need to increase her again, do I? The first ones are okay, but the more they happen, the more A, you will feel a bit sorry for Misty, and B, you will understand that, in reality, no one likes her and everyone is there ready to take her money and profit off of her. Okay, the second one is a bit of an exaggeration, but I also do not think it's that far off from the truth. The second ones are events that characterize the protagonist's party and the other secondary characters through single events or little storylines that, however, many times do not leave anything behind them and serve more to break the gameplay loop in which you are trapped more than anything else. Also, the writing on events does not help, as some are really badly written. I remember an event where Misty was speaking normally, but then she switched tenses and started talking about things that were happening now using the past, which I think is a leftover that proofreading wasn't able to catch, but those are the little details that can make the player feel a little disturbance in the force. Plus, but this is personal, citing Uncharted and Tomb Raider in a sort of medieval setting is completely nonsense. Sure, there can be books in the world, but to the player who can comprehend the citation, it just makes no sense what these characters know about them. If the story is not able to catch the player's interest, the characters surely do not help at all. Now, we have 17 party members plus other secondary characters. The party members are Misty, the protagonist, a normal girl that loves money and alchemy, Gladys, the daughter of some nobles from a country near Ostia, a girl who likes adventures, has absolutely no problem with money, loves Misty a bit too much, and considers Nathan Drake as her hero. Winnie, Gladys' maid, an explosives lover who has also two faces on her long sleeves that apparently are alive, though this is never discussed in the game. And after these three, which are the main core of the party and of the characters cast, we have Dylan, Mrs. Brother, a cis-con who likes mature women, Martina, a sportswoman who likes alcohol and can drink an entire bar without getting drunk in the slightest, Meredith, a pervert who goes around wearing a swimsuit, and nothing else. And finally Alma, a wandering comedian that likes Misty a lot and sometimes acts like a spy, though she's not one, she is hiding a much worse truth. She's a politician.
We'll make Kingdom NieR Ostia great again.
All of the characters that I've exposed here and that constitute the main characters of the game are never explored more in depth than the descriptions I have given about them. The ones that we actually get a bit of insight about are Winnie, Gladys and Misty, however the player doesn't even get to know that much. Plus, they never develop, the status quo is never overthrown and stays the same from the start to the finish, so much so that, in the ending, Misty still has depths with Gladys. So I had to ask, what was the point of the entire game if nothing changes? If the story doesn't matter and the characters do not matter, what was the point of it? As I said before, then there are some secondary characters that, however, are never really explored and appear like in 5 events each, so their existence is not entirely justified if not to make the world feel a little bit more alive by having more characters in it. Plus, the game likes to joke around and have a sort of comedy. However, it is a really stale one, as it normally just uses one characteristic per character and always that one to make a joke. For example, when the joke concerns Misty, it is normally about her love for money and for saving it. Those that concern Winnie always concern her love for explosions. Those about ladies concern her little consideration of money, her inability to do normal house tasks, as she is a noble and she has mates that do everything for her, and her love for adventure. As you might see, they can end up becoming pretty stale if they do not evolve, and unfortunately they do not, so the content of this title is one that becomes pretty boring pretty fast. However, now we arrive at the reason why I introduced this video with an overview on video game quitting, and that is the gameplay. The Emerald Tablets gameplay is divided into visual novel sections, dungeon exploration, city exploration, and the alchemy section. Let's analyze them separately, and then we're going to see what this means in terms of gameplay loop. The visual novel sections are just kinetic portions of the game where the story develops itself in a standard format where you have one or more characters on screen that just change their expressions and nothing more. So there is not that much to talk about here, it is literally just a normal kinetic visual novel experience that you can get anywhere else. As for the dungeon exploration, from the start you have a series of dungeons that you can see from the city gate. These have a difficulty rating that is indicated in stars and that goes from 1 to 5, where 1 is easy and 5 is difficult, the number of days that are going to pass if you decide to explore it, and you can also see what drops you can get there. However, there is no real level recommendation or anything that indicates to the player when it is ready to tackle the other stages. The recommended level is only a feature for story stages, and we are gonna talk about them later on. This task is delegated to the story progression, and not even always, but it is not exactly that well executed, so your best bet is just to save before entering one, see if the enemies there destroy you or not, and then, in case they actually overpower you, reload the previous save file and choose another one. Not all these stages are unlocked at the start, as some will become available after you have advanced a bit in the story or after a certain period of time has passed, but many are just day and night version of the same stage. However, I still think that the quantity of original dungeon is acceptable, that is not the main problem here. The problem here is, what do you do when you enter a dungeon? Well, the party you have preemptively organized in Misty's atelier is put in a side-scroller section with a time limit, and you continue going to the left until you either encounter resources, enemies, or chests. You break them with one of the 4 abilities your character can have, and so on until you either die or the time limit ends and you return to the village with the materials you have gathered. If this gameplay doesn't sound all that exciting, well, that is because it isn't. In fact, it's extremely repetitive and, most importantly, really shallow. There is no depth whatsoever in this section of the game. The enemies are always the same, and their attack pattern is just predictable after a few times you have encountered them. The combat system is really shallow, there is literally no exploration, as the only thing you do is moving to the left until you encounter the next event. Really, this part of the game was just not well thought. And as I have said before, this gameplay is also extremely repetitive, which makes it even more frustrating to play. In fact, after just some sorties, you are going to ask yourself if you can skip them, and the answer is no, you cannot. Also, you cannot pause the game, which... why? Really, why? There is no reason not to be able to pause a game such as this. There should literally not be any problem whatsoever doing that. Moreover, this game is also prone to button smashing, especially if you play as Misty, as some characters have only one attack and the other abilities are support ones, so you're going to always smash that key for the whole duration of the battle. The only positive thing is that you can control every character in the game, so you can control Misty or Gladys or Winnie or any one of the others based on your preference, and they end up having different types of abilities and combat, but you're never really incentivized to do this. You have to do it out of your own volition, otherwise you have no real reason to do that. Speaking of the characters, you have the possibility to improve them through a skill tree system that uses talent points, a currency you can earn every time you level up, to power various stats up and also to learn some active and passive skills, the most useful of which are the ones that make Gladys and Winnie sometimes automatically clear on their own some of the quests available at the tavern, which normally are an hassle to do, but also one of the only few ways to obtain a reputation and specific items that can make you earn experience or give to a determined characters an additional talent point. This system was okay, I don't think it actually has that deep of an impact on the game, but it is a side system that sometimes can be helpful, as I have highlighted before. However, let's return to the dungeon exploration, because I have highlighted how much repetitive it is, how mind-numbing it is, but I have not said a thing. From approximately the water breathing potion mission, a quest between the end of the early game and the start of the middle section of it, the game is also badly balanced, as it just has an immense spike in difficulty that is actually really hard to overcome and that never really disappears until the end of the game. And the funny thing is, before that, the game was almost mind-numbing, because it was not that hard. I do not understand from where does this spike of difficulty come, nor why it was necessary. Connected to this, there is also the exp scaling problem, as your main income of experience is not going to be in the exploration part where, normally you will get a decent amount of experience by beating enemies in the wild, but from random items that are given as rewards for quests or are sold once every 3 months by the tavern. This is because the enemies give you no experience at all, especially during the mid-game. In fact, many times you will feel as if you are stuck at the same point and as if you had made no progress whatsoever. Also, another thing that is connected to this, the recommended level for over half of the missions of the game is a lie. Normally, you need to be way above the expected level to comfortably beat it. If you are near the recommended level you can beat it, but many times you will just be obliterated without too much effort by the enemies, especially after the water breathing potion mission that signals when the balance of the entire game goes up in flames. So, this was all for the dungeon exploration part, but hey, if this part was this bad, maybe the alchemy and the city exploration are good, right? They are good, right? Wrong. The alchemy system is really similar to the one of the atelier series. In order to make something you need to add the ingredients, each one of which has specific traits, and when you create an object with them, the final product is going to have up to 6 of the traits of the materials used to craft it. At the start you have a recipe book that contains some basic recipes and a free mixing section, where you can put whatever materials you want and try to create something. However, there is just a tiny little problem here. Discovering new recipes by free mixing is almost impossible. The only way you have to learn on new alchemy recipes is to talk to the other characters in the world, hoping that they are going to mention it so that you can add them to your recipe book and use them from the free mixing section. Oh, sorry. They do not really get added to your recipe book. The recipe is only available in the free mixing part. If you go in the recipe book, you are not going to find any other recipe apart from the basic ones the game gives you at the start. I have just a question. Why? This is just some protocol nonsense, and really, if you wanted to copy a bit from the Atelier saga, at least do it right. Also, do you want to know a funny thing? The recipe you need in order to complete the game, the Blackstone, an important object in the story, is obtained exactly like this, by talking randomly towards the end of the game to your instructor inside the Alchemy Academy. So, if you're not someone that constantly spam talks with NPCs to see if they have something new to say, you can actually miss it entirely. Also, if you want a list of recipes to do in the free mixing without obtaining by yourself, well, good luck. There is no documentation on the internet about it, or at least documentation that I could find. Moving on, alchemy in this game has 3 main uses: to create story objects or items that can help you in dungeons, to create stuff to sell for money, and to gain reputation. However, if the product you are trying to craft has some bad traits, you can also lose reputation, and let me remember you need 400,000 reputation points to graduate. Normally, the reputation you get increases by the quality of the finished item, but normally gives you 400 reputation for a normal crafting, if not even less. So, in order to finish these requirements only by crafting items, and supposing that you effectively get always 400 reputation every time you craft an item, you will need to craft 1000 items, which doesn't seem that much, but trust me, it is. As for money, the situation is a bit easier, as there is a particular item that is a common drop and that can be used to obtain something that can be normally sold for 3000 gold, so there is nothing to say here, if not that you will find yourself crafting the same thing over and over again, which can become extremely boring after a while. However, apart from this, there is nothing else to say about the alchemy system. It works, but it is nothing exciting nor incredible. Apart from this, the only other thing we have to see is what to do in the city, and this reduces to see the few events that are scattered throughout the game, buy things at the church, the tavern or the merchant guild, talk to charters, adjust your party in Misty's atelier, and undertake quests. The merchant guild has 2 annual sales that, however, are essentially useless, while the tavern is the most useful structure in the entire game, as it sells food that can be used to give you some boosts when you go to a dungeon, and also those special items that give you experience and talent points. In Misty's Atelier you can change the equipment of your party members, change the party composition, spend talent points in the skill tree, rest from 1 to 5 days, and, well, perform alchemy obviously. Apart from this, there is not that much to do, as the world just feels empty and stale. The characters practically never change their dialogues, nothing ever happens outside of the few events scattering on there, so it just feels devoid of any real presence. So, after having presented all of this is the gameplay loop in which you are chained to. You explore repetitive and uninspired linear dungeons with a shallow combat system, you return, you see the few events there are to see, if there are some of course, you then craft through alchemy the same items to sell in order to gain a bit of reputation and of money, you see what quests are available in the tavern, you see if it restocked on special items, and then you start all over again. You can easily comprehend how someone can find this cycle boring and decide to drop the game after it gets a little bit harder, but gives nothing in return in order to make the player more interested in what it's doing. This is also why I did the introduction to this video. The Emerald Tablet is exactly the type of game where, the more you hear about it, the more you just envision a droppable game with no particular redeeming qualities. Many of its problems actually lie in the mechanics execution and not with the ideas. The idea behind the Emerald Tablet is overall good, but the implementation of the various mechanics just left a lot to be desired, aka the game design of this game is just abysmal. I'll just make you another example that I think exemplifies this. In a game where you have to repay a debt, and where, because of this, money is an important resource, there is an enemy in the mid to late game that makes you drop ginormous quantities of gold, and if you lose, you permanently lose the money it stole. Whoever thought this was a good idea? No, it is not. The Emerald Tablet is just a manual example of what not to do if you actually want someone to finish your game. Literally, you could bring this game as a case study to a university course in game design, and you could have several lectures where you just talk about this game because, really, it's just a manual case of what not to do with game design. Close this parenthesis, let's return to review and see the last aspects of the game we have yet to see, the graphics and the music. The graphics are nothing breathtaking, but they are also not that bad. The chibi characters and the monster sprites in the dungeon sections are good, as well as the backgrounds, but what could be debatable is the art style of the characters and of the backgrounds in the visual novel sections. Personally, I didn't really mind it, but I also do not think it is that great. As a last thing, the GUI of the various menus is okay, with the Alchemist one, and especially the shop ones, being heavily inspired by Atelier series ones. As for the music, it was forgettable. Literally nothing to write home about because it was just the most generic fantasy music you could imagine. This game also does not have voice acting, which, as I always say, is not a problem, as it is something that costs quite a bit, and if you don't have a big budget, it's something you tend not to include to keep the cost low and acceptable. I needed 22 hours to finish the game, but I also skipped a lot of days through sleeping when I finished everything, so I can see someone end the game in 30 hours if it wants to do more, or it needs more time to finish the various objectives the game gives you. As for replayability, I think this game has none, unless you want to replay an identical game without any new game plus. Still, I'm quite sure there are some bad endings for not succeeding in completing your objectives, but I honestly did not verify this. I just suppose this because this would be the most normal thing to do, but they can also be absent. The Emerald Tablet is a game that conceptually had good ideas, but miserably fails at concretizing them in a good and enjoyable game. The end result is a tedious and repetitive video game with an uninteresting and mind-numbing gameplay loop and a successive spike in difficulty that just screams "drop me" to an already bored out player. It has some decent aspects, however those are not important enough to salvage the game alone, making it just drown in the sea of mediocrity that contains way too many games in this day and age. I don't think I can recommend it, especially because I don't know who would actually enjoy it. Maybe those that like monotonous gameplay loops, but I don't know if they even exist. I would honestly not even recommend it to those that want to play an atelier-like game, because I bought it exactly for that reason, and I came out absolutely disappointed. So, to close the circle, why did I start with a brief talk about quitting in video games, and why game design is many times the cause of it? Because my experience with the Emerald Tablet was one that could have ended prematurely around 8 hours in, as I contemplated whether to drop it or not in what I considered to be almost the mid-game. In the end, I decided to persevere, wanting to see whether things would improve later on or not, but I could have equally also dropped it, as I had a hunch that it would have not improved a bit in the subsequent hours. I thought that, retrospectively, was spot on. But, more than anything, the point I wanted to prove is this. People need to give game design the importance it deserves. As I said at the start, many times it is game design the reason why something does not work, and the Emerald Tablet is the living example of what bad game design can produce. What I want to showcase is how important it is to design functions of the game based also on how they interact with each other. They are not separated modules, but they are linked to each other in a way that, if one or more do not function properly, they can bring down the world building with them. If something conceptually works, but in reality does not, change that so that it works. Don't leave it there just because, well, I already made it, I can change it later, or nah, this was my vision, this is perfect. This is also what testing is for, to see if what you produce can be a good product in the eyes of a normal, unbiased player. Then, just to add another thing, We can also debate whether bad story and characters are a part of game design or whether they are the fault of the writers and the game designers have nothing to do with them, but if you consider that also as game design, then the Emerald Tablet is also a good example of how lazy and bad writing never wins. As a good story can make the player be stuck until the end even to a bad game, an awful story can make anyone drop even the best game available on the market. And if you have a bad story, conjugated with a bad game, no one is exactly going to like it. In any case, for what it matters, the Emerald Tablet will live as an example of the importance of good game design in the video game industry, and as an example of what not to do in a game. And with this, I think we conclude the video. Thank you very much for arriving here, if you have actually arrived here and if you are listening to these words. If you want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing to the channel and yada yada yada, all the things the normal YouTubers say and that they should not say because you probably know them by heart by now. Anyways, this was all for this video, I don't have anything else to say, so this was all from SigmaOni, and I'll see you all in my next video.